Hi, I'm Amy with SewingMachinesPlus.com. On behalf of SewingMachinesPlus.com, I would like to thank you and congratulate you on the purchase of your new BERNINA embroidery machine. In this video, we will work through the pages of the BERNINA Embroidery Machine Mastery Workbook. This video, along with the workbook and your machine manual, are designed to get you familiarized with the navigation and features of your new BERNINA embroidery machine. Let's get started. Cleaning and oiling the machine is one of the most important things you can do to keep your machine in tip-top shape. BERNINA considers it so important that they built in a tutorial program for you to use. You can reference cleaning and oiling on page 45 of the workbook.
To attach the module, lift up and position the module at an angle and slide the connectors into the slots. Lower the module. To attach the slide-on tray, slide it over top of the arm, along the free arm, and then snug into place. It's impossible to attach the module at an angle with the slide-on table attached. To detach the slide-on table, press the button on the right-hand side of the tray and slide the tray under the arm, but not passing it all the way through. To remove the module, lift up on the end at the same angle or at an angle and then pull away from the machine just as you did when you attached it. To reattach the slide-on table, just push the slide-on table onto the free arm, and now if you were wanting to stitch and sew only, you are all set. To finish setting up for embroidery, change the stitch plate by pressing on the circled dot in the upper right-hand corner, and then replacing it with the 0mm or cut work plate, indicated by an orange square. Snap it into place, and then change the presser foot by lifting up on the latch, placing the embroidery foot on the cone and closing the latch, and then changing the needle to suit your project. So change from a standard sewing needle to an embroidery needle that's appropriate for the embroidery project that you are planning. To finish setting up for embroidery, make the same changes on screen. Select the presser foot selection and change it to the embroidery foot, foot number 26, found in the first area with the large star. Then select the stitch plate selection and change it to either the straight stitch or the straight stitch cut work plate. In embroidery on the 8 series, the feed dogs automatically drop, indicated by the yellow icon. Close the screen and you're now ready to embroider. To set the 7 series up for embroidery, raise the module at an angle and slide the connectors into the sockets. It has to be attached at an angle and cannot be attached when the slide-on tray is already attached. The slide-on tray offers support for embroidery and can be attached after the module is attached. Then, change the stitch plate and the presser foot. Attach presser foot number 26, the embroidery presser foot, and change out the stitch plate from the sewing stitch plate to the embroidery stitch plate, which is either a straight stitch or a cut work plate. It snaps into place, and then make these same changes on screen. Select embroidery by selecting Home and Embroidery, and lower the feed dogs as indicated by the animation. With an embroidery design selected, select the presser foot selection and select the embroidery foot number 26. Set the stitch plate to the stitch plate that you have attached and close, and you are ready for embroidery. To set the 5 series up for embroidery, attach the module by sliding straight in and not at an angle to the machine, aligning the connectors to the sockets. To remove, press in on the handle and pull straight away from the machine. The slide-on table is optional for embroidery but offers support to the hoops. Continue setting up for embroidery by changing the presser foot from the sewing presser foot to an embroidery presser foot number 26. Change out the sewing stitch plate to the embroidery stitch plate or the cut work or straight stitch stitch plate. Snap into place. And now you want to make these same adjustments on screen. Begin by selecting a design. Set the presser foot to foot number 26 by selecting the presser foot selection and selecting foot number 26. You will also want to lower the feed dogs by pushing in the button on the side of the machine. Change the stitch plate to the 0mm or the cut work stitch plate. Close the needle plate security, and now you are ready to embroider.
Insert a new 7511 or 8012 embroidery needle. You can reference embroidery needles on page 42 of your workbook.
To change the needle, use the needle changing screwdriver to loosen and remove the needle. Insert a fresh needle with the flat side to the back. You may need to loosen the screw in order to insert the needle all the way up into the opening, and then tighten with the needle changing screwdriver.
For best results, use a high-quality 60-weight embroidery thread in the bobbin. The lighter weight embroidery thread helps to pull the needle thread to the back side for a prettier top stitch. You can reference embroidery threads on page 43 of your workbook.
To wind a jumbo bobbin, place the bobbin on the spindle, and it only fits on the machine one way. Put the thread on the machine with sponge and appropriate spool cap, and follow the path, taking the thread through the guides and wrapping the thread around the bobbin. Cut the thread tail on the winder cutter and begin winding the bobbin. When winding a bobbin, the bobbin winding screen appears, allowing you to change the speed at which the bobbin is wound. You can move the slider or use the multifunction knobs or the plus or minus. Use the check mark to confirm and continue winding your bobbin. Let the bobbin wind until completion and it will stop automatically, or engage the lever to stop the winding at any time. Cut the thread on the cutter on the bobbin winder, and you are ready to install the bobbin into the machine. Wind your bobbin before beginning a project, or wind and sew while sewing your project. To change the jumbo bobbin, open the bobbin door and press on the raised part of the metal bar. Remove the bobbin and the bobbin case. To remove the bobbin from the bobbin case, press on that same raised area of the metal bar for the bobbin to be released. To reinsert the bobbin into the bobbin case, the bobbin only fits in the case one way. Find that right way, and then take the thread around the bobbin case through the slit and then up into the little guide. Take the bobbin and bobbin case and install that back into the machine, pressing on the opposite side of the bobbin case. Take the thread tail, cut it on the bobbin cutter, and close the door. The thread has been cut to make the first stitch. To wind a bobbin, place the bobbin on the spindle. Place a spool of thread on the dedicated bobbin winded spool pin, which is slanted. Take the thread straight up through the two guides on the thread stand. Then bring the thread down and put it into the metal guide at the base of the thread stand. Take the thread counterclockwise on the bobbin tensioner and then clockwise around the bobbin, cutting on the cutter. When the bobbin is placed on the spindle, the bobbin winding screen appears. You can decide how fast or how slow you want to wind the bobbin, perfect for an assortment of different types of threads, and then you can predetermine the bobbin fill level before you start to wind. When you have your settings determined, select the bobbin winding button to wind the bobbin. Let the bobbin wind until it stops automatically, predetermined by the setting that you set. Take the bobbin off of the spindle and cut the thread on the bobbin thread cutter on the front of the machine. Open the bobbin door and let the bobbin present itself. Remove the installed bobbin by sliding the latch to the left. Place the new bobbin on the bobbin spindle and let the thread go into the side slit. Let the bobbin run 2 revolutions as you take the thread to the left, and then let the thread run down or trace down the bobbin retaining finger until the bobbin thread pops into the extra guide for embroidery. Then take the thread to the cutter and close the door. Thread the machine for sewing or embroidery by placing the thread on the spool pin and taking the thread to the guide directly above. Take the thread into the corner of the machine, hitting the metal guide and waiting for the automatic threader button to illuminate. Take the thread across the top of the machine, holding the thread with the right hand, continuing taking the thread across and down and then into the guides above the needle and the gray slot, and then take the thread to the cutter and cut straight down. Release the thread with your right hand and press the automatic needle threader button. The threader will put the thread in the take-up lever and thread the needle. Leave the thread tail as is when threaded. It is the right length the machine can manage as you are beginning a sewing or an embroidery stitch. To remove thread from the machine, cut the thread where the thread enters the machine. Then from the needle area, remove the thread from the eye of the needle, and then pull the thread from the needle area, thus allowing the thread to travel through the machine in the way it normally should travel, and avoiding entangling within the machine parts. When the thread breaks and it's not by the needle, you'll need to use the multifunction tool to remove the cover. Put the multifunction tool in an open area and you'll feel it spring. Press against the spring and the door hinge is open. Here you're able to see the thread that is broken. Cut the thread where the thread enters the machine as before, and then pull the thread from this area. Then reattach the door, hinging the door back into place and then sliding it into position. You are now ready to rethread the machine for embroidery or sewing. To thread the machine, place the sponge, the thread, and the appropriate spool cap on the spindle. Take the thread to the back guide and bring it forward. Bring it down and back up into the take-up lever and back down into two guides above the needle. Bring the semi-automatic needle thread down and thread the eye of the needle. Bring the loop through the needle and cut the thread tail on the side cutter. This is the appropriate length that can be tied off and cut before stitching without jamming. To remove thread from the machine, cut the thread as it enters the machine. Then remove the thread from the eye of the needle and continue pulling, keeping the thread traveling through the machine in the way it was intended. To hoop for embroidery, notice how the hoop is put together, with the two triangles facing each other at the bottom of the hoop. Use the set screw to loosen to separate the inner from the outer ring, and then get your fabric and your stabilizer, selecting a stabilizer that is suitable to your project. Take your inner ring and sandwich the stabilizer and the fabric together inside the outer ring. It should fit snugly but not be forced, and this will give you a good hooping. There are times when you'll want to use the template to help hoop your fabric, often when matching a crosshair. Put the template inside being held in place with the hoop holders, and then also, again, hoop the fabric without stressing the fabric. The inner hoop should fit easily within the outer ring. Be sure that the two triangles were pointing toward each other. When you're using the template, you should be able to read the word BERNINA, and once you have your fabric inserted into the hoop, tighten the set screw. Then check that the inner ring is offset from the outer ring just slightly, allowing the stabilizer to be what rides along the free arm during embroidery. This will prevent etching.
Stabilizers are classified by how they are removed, and there are three basic types: tear away, cut away, and wash away. You can reference more about stabilizers on page 44 of the workbook. The Embroidery Consultant is only available on the B880 Plus, 790 Plus, 700, 590, and 500. The Creative Consultant provides information and help for a variety of sewing and embroidery needs. To access the Creative Consultant, touch the Creative Consultant icon, which looks like a dress form. Select the technique and type of fabric desired. The Creative Consultant provides suggestions regarding needles, presser feet, and stabilizers. For more information on each recommendation, click on the icon next to the recommendation. Once you are finished reviewing the recommendations, click the X in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Once the X has been clicked, click the green box to go back to editing your design.
To attach the hoop, a design will be on the screen and you will have selected the embroidery stitch out screen. The module arm will move into place, and at this point you can attach the hoop. Slide the hoop under the presser foot, use the two gray tabs to press in, and then set them on top of the guides on the module arm. To remove the hoop, press in on the gray tabs, lift up, and remove the hoop from the machine. BERNINA embroidery machines come with alphabets and built-in designs. The number of each depends on the model of the machine. Some machines also are able to import sewing stitches into the embroidery side, and that is indicated by a folder with sewing stitches displayed on the folder. Also, all BERNINA machines are able to access designs that are stored on a USB stick. Currently, the display view we're looking at are the folders that are on the machine indicated by the machine icon, but if the USB stick option were selected, it would display the designs on the USB stick. Also, you are able to store your own designs, your custom creations, in your My Designs or your personal folder. So there's always a place for you to store the things that you have created for future use. Let's take a look at how easy it is to select an alphabet or a design. To select an alphabet, select the Alphabets folder. You will have arrows, or you'll be able to scroll to see additional folders of alphabets. You're able to select the alphabet, a keyboard appears, and then you will begin to input your alphabets or your wording by clicking on the letters. To open up a embroidery motif, we'll use the navigation path to go back, and we'll select the butterfly folder, which is the motifs folder. There'll be a variety of different folders that you can pick from depending on the model that you have. Some folders that you select will display designs immediately, while other folders will show you more folders to select from, and then will show you additional designs. Always take note if you have one or two pages, if there's an arrow, or if you'll scroll to see additional designs. But there are plenty of built-in designs built into your machine for great customization, and then there is the USB option to access embroidery designs from BERNINA exclusive collections or embroidery online collections. Learn to use the navigation path of breadcrumbs at the top to help you navigate quickly through your settings. For best embroidery results, you should embroider a design in the hoop that matches the size of the design the best. This provides additional stabilization to the action of where the embroidery is happening. When a design is selected, the embroidery hoop that is paired with the design is always the one that is closest in size to the design, unless you already have a hoop selected and the machine has read that hoop. Therefore, the hoop that is on the machine overrides the suggested hoop selection. If you look at your status bar, you'll notice that there is a hoop icon that has replaced the presser foot pressure icon that you have in sewing. When selected, this will show you the hoops that you have available and the choices that you have. When you see partial icons and shading, you know that there is more, so you can vertically scroll to see the additional hoops that are available. You can select an additional hoop and it will tell you that that hoop has been selected. It will still be in gray until you have placed the hoop on the machine and the machine has read the hoop. But this allows you to select larger hoops so that you have more design space, or the hoop that is best appropriate to the design that you are working on. Other icons that you'll find in this screen are parking icons. You will also see the grid icon, and by selecting it once you will get a red or a large cursor. A second time will give you a grid. Often it's advantageous to select the grid option when you're working with specific alignments, such as when you're adding lettering or you're trying to balance the design on screen. The third selection will turn both of those cursors and the grid off. The bullseye, or the center of the motif icon, toggles between the first stitch in the design and the center of the design, so you can decide which is the better option for you to work with. The icon below this is the virtual positioning icon. This should always be turned on. This is what enables absolute check to be effective when you are working. To calibrate your embroidery hoops, select the Setup, Embroidery, and select Calibration. The needle will move to the center of the hoop and should land on top of the center of the template that you have placed. If it does not, use the arrows on the screen to position the needle over the center hole in the template. Once the needle is in position to the center, check to confirm. You will always get a better calibration if you have fabric and stabilizer in the hoop for the template to rest on. You also need to use the template holders to secure the template into place. You need to calibrate the oval hoop and all the hoops larger than that, anytime they are new or anytime after an update. Attach the hoop to the machine as we indicated when prompted. The needle then moves to the center, and at this time you can hand rock the needle into that area to see if you are in the center. If not, use the arrows, and again use the hand wheel to lower the needle and raise the needle to get a good calibration. Check to confirm and you have completed hoop calibration for this hoop. Get in the habit of working with your setup and your embroidery settings before beginning a design. This allows you to program how you want the design to operate as you're working. Let's take a look at some of these. You're centering the embroidery motif may be an area you want to check out or reset when you've worked with the embroidery software. This allows you to bring a design in off-center. The default on the machine is to bring a design in centered. Use the embroidery setup breadcrumb and go back to those settings. Let's take a look at the thread away mode. Activating thread away mode allows a quick movement of the hoop to ensure that the thread tails are transferred to the top of the fabric so that they can be then knotted and transferred to the back at the beginning of a stitch. This is more important when you have embroidery motifs in the hoop that are very close together, and often the thread tails will stay on top. This is a setting that you can turn on and off as you wish. You also have the ability to change the unit of measurement. The default measurement is millimeters, and this will show on your hoop size as well as the embroidery size. But if you would rather see it in inches, you can select inches. This is only in effect for embroidery. This has no bearing on sewing. Select your hoop icon breadcrumb, and let's take a look at the cut length. There are three things that you can set with the scissors. One is, do you want to have cuts between colors? The default is on. Do you want to have the machine stop after the first 7 stitches, allowing you to trim the thread tail? This often isn't necessary, so deactivating this can help you on your way and get your embroidery done a lot quicker. The machine will also cut in between thread jumps, and you can determine what this length is going to be. The default is 6. When you are using the ungroup tool, you may want to set this to 1 so that you can break apart a design or ungroup a design with as many as possible. Select the embroidery settings icon and go back to the embroidery settings menu. Select your Smart Secure. Embroidery motifs are programmed with or without securing stitches, and the machine can recognize this. In these two places, you can set whether or not you want the machine to add securing stitches to those designs. When you are finished with this area, select the close, and now you're ready to begin your embroidery. Let's begin with the design. We're going to select the design from the USB stick, so we'll select the USB stick option at the top of the screen. And we're going to select the design that looks like little leaves. We're going to change the hoop size to an oval hoop, and this will give us some room to work. So select the hoop selection icon and select the oval hoop, and then close the hoop selection screen. Right now, you can move things around on screen just by dragging and dropping, but to do anything else, you'll need to select the information icon. To rotate, which is the icon next to the move icon, you can use the multifunction knobs to rotate in 1-degree increments, or you can rotate in 90 degrees very quickly just by touching +90. To stay within the information area, to access the remainder of the icons, use the information breadcrumb. To change the size of a design, you will use the resize icon. The resize icon will resize something proportionally by using either of the multifunction knobs if the white outline is around the lock function. When the white outline is not on the lock function, you're able to use the lower knob to change the height, and you're able to use the upper knob to change the width. Anytime that you've made changes to a design, you will notice there is a yellow bounded box around it. To clear or to revert this back to its original size, you can tap on the yellow bounded box and now it reverts back to its original. Just for convenience, you may want to reset the rescale tool back to its default setting of having the resize being proportional. We're going to stay within the information screen by selecting the I breadcrumb, and we'll look at the next two icons in the list. And these are mirror image side to side and mirror image up down. Side to side just flips the design side to side, so it's very convenient versus having to spin it with rotate or select the +90. You also can turn it off to put it back or do the mirror image up down. Maybe you want both at the same time. Again, if you don't really remember which you've changed, any of these with the yellow bounded box is your indication that you have those functions engaged. You also can select clear from the black bar, and it will clear everything that you've done, including putting it back to center and turning off the mirror images. If you are working and you're using the mirror image, you also can use the undo function if your machine has this, and the redo function. Another handy tool is the ability to duplicate a design. Select duplicate and it will add another design. I see that with the layers that I have a second design, but I'm not really able to see it because it places it right on top of itself. You can add duplicate a second time and then drag and drop it into place. Additional things that can be done with editing is deleting designs and adding designs to the screen. Currently, we have multiple designs on the screen from our previous exercise. We have 3 of the same thing, and they really don't all fit in the hoop. In the information area, you have a trash can. When the information menu is open, it's very easy to select the trash can. Select the layer of something that you want to delete and select the trash can. You will always be asked, "Are you sure?" and you must either check to confirm or X out to retain the design on screen. If the information menu were not open and you were adding a series of designs, An easier way to delete, because the information menu is not open, is to swipe and delete. So delete by swiping happens by tapping on the layer and moving it off to the side. And again, you get the same confirmation menu to be sure that you are sure you want to delete that design. You then can move things around. If you want to add a design to what you have going on, select the plus. So above the layers, the very last layer or the topmost layer is always the plus. And this will allow you to add a design, such as one of the ones from the USB stick. Keep in mind that if you want to add something, it will always take you back to where you chose your last design, and in this case was the USB stick. To select the design from the USB stick, select the flower, and then it comes to the screen. You can tap on either of the designs and move them around. You can use the information icons to change the design or do any rotations until you create a design that is pleasing to what you want to see or which you think might work well in your design. To see everything in your hoop, you may notice that only layer 2 is in color, but layer 1 is faded out. So the bottommost layer will allow you to select everything about your design, show it all in color, and in this view or with this selection allows you to move the entire design around at one time, and anything that you would select about the design would happen to the design entirely. So it is a way to select everything. But if you want to individually tweak any of the designs, then you certainly can do that by isolating just an area of the design that you need. And those are just some very basic editing features for deleting and adding. Let's say you wanted to add a design and you wanted to go beyond the USB stick. You'll need to select the machine icon and then select the folder and begin looking for the design that you are looking for. You can always go back to the edit screen if you change your mind, very easily just by selecting the edit tab and going back to the edit screen and continuing from here. Anytime that you are working with combining designs or working with designs that you've changed the size of, added and deleted, your design may not be in center. So to put a design in center that you have created, select the bottommost layer so that everything is selected, select the move icon, and then select the hoop centering icon. By selecting this icon, you have now placed the entire design in the center of the hoop. There are several ways to check placement of an embroidery design before you begin the project on your BERNINA. You'll need to have your hoop attached with the project. Then come back into your edit screen and open the information menu and scroll to find the Check Trace option. When you select Check Trace, it puts an imaginary box around the design which will give you an idea of where the design is going to stitch. Right now the needle has moved to the upper left-hand corner of the box. By activating each of these arrows, I can watch the needle trace the area on my project where it's going to stitch. Selecting the center icon allows the needle to move to the center of my design. On your fabric, your needle will be over the center area. This may be marked by a crosshair. If the needle is not over top of the crosshair like you are expecting, use your multifunction knobs to move the design either sideways or up and down so that you can move the needle center into the right spot. Once you've moved it into the center spot, you can deactivate, and then you can also trace around the design to double check that it is still going to embroider in the area that you want. When you have finished, close out of the information menu, select your embroidery sew out screen, and you're ready to stitch your design. Absolute check or virtual positioning is another method for perfect placement. It allows you to check every stitch of the design. It is always done in the Edit tab. Your project needs to be hooped and on the machine, and you touch the stitch point. The needle moves to that spot in the hoop and on your project, and you're able to get a visual stitch by stitch of where every stitch is going to stitch on your design. If it is not going to stitch in the right spot or the expected spot, use the multifunction knobs or drag and drop on screen to reposition the design. In this case, when the bottom of the design was selected, it's going to stitch the pocket closed. So we'll use the multifunction knob to reposition the design up so that the design is coming more out of the pocket and not showing the pocket closed. We'll then touch the north part of the design and see where it's going to go. And it's going to clear the shoulder seam. But if it didn't, we could then move things over by using the multifunction knobs. And again, we're going to continue selecting every stitch point of the design, the top, the bottom, and both sides until we're certain that the motif is going to embroider in the right spot on our project. This is perfect for ready-made things where you may not be able to hoop it, and perhaps for designs that are also not square or very linear. At this point, you're ready to stitch out the design, engage a basting box to hold the project in the hoop, and stitch. When you have your embroidery design ready to stitch out and you are in the Embroidery tab or the Sew Out screen, you have some options that you can set. If you prefer to stitch your design as a single color design, then you can select the single color icon. To rotate or scroll through the colors in the design, select the down arrow. Scroll back to the beginning so that the design starts at the beginning. To engage single color, select single color. The design will stitch in its entirety without stopping to ask you to change threads or stopping at all and waiting for you to initiate the sequence again. If you decide to engage the basting box, it is the topmost icon in the list. Select it once and it places a basting box around the perimeter of the design. The stitching is actually very close to where the stitching of the design will occur. Select it a second time and the basting will occur close to the perimeter of the hoop. A third time we'll turn the basting box off. Turn the basting box on to engage. Another icon that you may be interested in double checking is that the cut between the thread colors is engaged, and so you would have a yellow box around this icon also. When you have checked these things, you are now ready to stitch the design by selecting the Start Stop button. When you have your embroidery design ready to stitch out and you are in the Embroidery tab or the Sew Out screen, you have some options that you can set. If you prefer to stitch your design as a single color design, then you can select the single color icon. To rotate or scroll through the colors in the design, select the down arrow. Scroll back to the beginning so that the design starts at the beginning. To engage single color, select single color. The design will stitch in its entirety without stopping to ask you to change threads or stopping at all and waiting for you to initiate the sequence again. If you decide to engage the basting box, it is the topmost icon in the list. Select it once and it places a basting box around the perimeter of the design. The stitching is actually very close to where the stitching of the design will occur. Select it a second time and the basting will occur close to the perimeter of the hoop. A third time we'll turn the basting box off. Turn the basting box on to engage. Another icon that you may be interested in double checking is that the cut between the thread colors is engaged, and so you would have a yellow box around this icon also. When you have checked these things, you are now ready to stitch the design by selecting the Start Stop button. When you are stitching out the design, you will see an icon of a rabbit. Engaging the rabbit allows the machine to stitch at its maximum speed for that hoop size. You will only see the rabbit in the Sewing Out screen. The best way to stitch at maximum speed is to engage the rabbit and set the slide speed control so that the machine is stitching at its maximum without incurring additional thread breaks. Eventually, during an embroidery, the thread is going to break, and when the thread breaks, the machine will stop stitching and the sequence control screen will appear. On the left is an overview of the design, and the needle location is marked with the bullseye. On the right is a close-up view of the stitches. To move the needle back in the design, use the multifunction knobs. The upper multifunction knob will move the needle one stitch at a time, while the lower multifunction knob will move the needle in groups of 100 stitches. So it's a good idea to know which multifunction knob you need before reaching for one. It is a good idea to backtrack through the design with the upper knob overstitching a few stitches to reinforce the stitching. When the needle is in the position, use the Start-Stop button to resume your embroidery. When the design finishes, there will be two options on the screen. The option on the left with the checkered flag is the single embroidery finish, while the option on the left is used with endless embroidery. Select the checkered flag and the machine returns to the embroidery sew-out screen in single mode.
For the exercise on page 27, you will hoop the fabric at this time. For the B700 owners, you will mark the center with the X and Y axis and hoop slightly crooked. The goal is for you to see that you do not have to hoop your fabric centered or perfect. The pinpoint placement feature will align the design to the marks on the fabric.
To hoop for embroidery, notice how the hoop is put together, with the two triangles facing each other at the bottom of the hoop. Use the set screw to loosen to separate the inner from the outer ring, and then get your fabric and your stabilizer, selecting a stabilizer that is suitable to your project. Take your inner ring and sandwich the stabilizer and the fabric together inside the outer ring. It should fit snugly but not be forced, and this will give you a good hooping. There are times when you'll want to use the template to help hoop your fabric, often when matching a crosshair. Put the template inside being held in place with the hoop holders, and then also, again, hoop the fabric without stressing the fabric. The inner hoop should fit easily within the outer ring. Be sure that the two triangles were pointing toward each other. When you're using the template, you should be able to read the word BERNINA, and once you have your fabric inserted into the hoop, tighten the set screw. Then check that the inner ring is offset from the outer ring just slightly, allowing the stabilizer to be what rides along the free arm during embroidery. This will prevent etching. With pinpoint placement, we can align any design with 2 points, regardless of how we've hooped our project. We'll start by selecting the grid and select our first of 2 points. The needle moves to that position in the hoop on the project. You then will use your multifunction knobs to align the needle over the drawn crosshair or the center mark. When you have the needle over the center mark, you will touch Set on the screen. The dot will turn yellow and you will select your second point. Tap on the screen, it turns a darker gray. Again, your needle moves to that position on your project. This is the time you can check another placement area. If it is off, you will use one of your multifunction knobs, depending on which alignment tool you're using, to position it in place and touch Set. Again, it turns yellow. Close out of the pinpoint placement box and now you're ready to stitch your design. This being a quilting design, it allows us to use another really great tool called the Thread Up command. In embroidery, your Needle Up Down button functions as Thread Up, which allows you to bring the bobbin tail up. This is good for any design that you prefer to manage your thread tail in a different fashion than knotting it in place. We'll re-engage the Start-Stop button and we'll let the design start stitching some of its design. At a convenient spot, we'll clip the thread tails in this example, but in reality we might decide to knot those in between the layers of a quilt sandwich or take them to the back. We'll finish stitching our design And when we're finished, we have perfectly placed our design in the alignment that we required or desired on our project. And this is pinpoint placement. Lettering is a great way to add personalization to any project. Built-in alphabets make this easy. By selecting the folder with the alphabets and scrolling either through the arrows or a vertical scroll, depending on how your machine is working, you can see your alphabets to choose from. You also can use the help function or the question mark to find out what the name of that alphabet is if you're looking for a specific one. We're going to start with the Swiss alphabet. You have uppercase characters, lowercase numbers, and special characters that you can work from. We're going to type in the word BERNINA. If you make a mistake, the delete key on the top will easily fix that. And check to confirm. This comes to the screen, and you're now able to use any of the information icon creative functions that you would for any motif with your lettering. If you want to change the size, you have your change size icon, and with the lock engaged, you're able to change this proportionally. So by using the multifunction knobs, you can take them proportionally up or proportionately down in size. If you disengage the lock, you're able to make them wider by using the upper knob or making them taller or shorter by using the lower knob. Staying within the information menu, select the breadcrumb. Scroll up to reveal the word art icon. This appears when you have lettering on screen. The upper knob will adjust the spacing of the lettering, helpful for when some letters may not be quite as visible, such as the I next to the N. The lower knob will arc your lettering. Turning it to the right gives you a rainbow type effect, whereas turning it to the left gives you the opposite effect. Let's explore a little bit more with lettering and word art. We have a couple of things already entered into our screen, and we're going to continue adding things. We'll access the Add, which is in the uppermost portion of the layers, and then navigate either with the scrolling arrows or scrolling to find the alphabet that you're looking for. Select lowercase and type in the word TO, and then check to confirm. Drag and drop it into place. Select Add again. Move to the alphabet that you need. And using upper and lowercase, type in the word Create. But if you make a mistake, use the Delete key. Select your lowercase to complete typing in the word. And check to confirm. Drag and drop and place the word into position. Any of the lettering that is on screen can now be adjusted using any of the functions in the information menu, such as the resize or the duplicate or the rotate. And then there is also word art that can be used. We have 4 layers for each of the 4 things we've typed in. To change one of the layers, select the layers, it selects the lettering, and then select the icon that you need. Word art was already used on the word BERNINA to affect the spacing. To adjust the curve of the word, use the lower multifunction knob. Select the next lettering either by the layer or by tapping on screen. You could still use the word art function since this screen is open, or by staying within the menu using the breadcrumb, you can also change the size. Once you've made the changes, move it into place. As you are working, it's easy to go back and forth between the layers just by tapping on the layer or the word on screen. You can select the word BERNINA and select Rotate to add a rotation. Dragging and dropping is always available. To make changes to the word Create, use the I breadcrumb and select Word Art. Use the lower multifunction knob and turn to the left to create a different curve. And then add a rotation to the word Create and drag and drop it into place. Anytime that you do on-screen editing, it's likely that your design becomes off-center. Select the Move icon, and the centering icon is the icon in the window. Scroll down to the bottommost layer to select your entire design so that the entire design is centered and not just one layer that could be selected. Select the bottom layer to select everything, and then select the centering icon. Your design is now centered in the hoop. Close the information icon, select the Sew Out screen, and now you're ready to stitch your design. You have the ability to save designs or your custom creations to the machine memory or to the USB stick. To do that, you'll start by selecting the selection folder and take a look at what the arrows are doing with these folders. Arrows coming out of the folder mean retrieve, such as File Open. Arrows going into the folder means you want to put something away, such as Save. If you keep these two arrows straight, you'll always know if you are opening a file, getting something new, or saving something. To save the design, I'll select the Save icon. Then I need to look and see which icon is selected at the top. Is it the machine or the USB stick? Because you can save to both. If you're saving to the machine, select the highlighted design and it is saved to the machine's memory. If you want to save to the USB stick, select the selection menu, select the Save icon, select the USB stick, and select the highlighted file. While you are working with opening and saving, it's easy to get confused, especially when you're just beginning. So if you intend to open a design and you have a design on screen and you go to the selection menu and you mean to select open, but instead you select save, but you're thinking you're going to open something, and then you see the design you're looking for, which you select, and when you see this screen, this indicates you're about to overwrite the selected design with what is on screen. If this is not what you intended to do, then you want to select X. If you get this screen and you just think, oh, I'm opening, and you select the check mark, you will overwrite the design and the design will no longer be there. So I'm going to select the X because I don't really want to overwrite that design. To open a design, we'll select the X, we'll go back to the selection menu, we'll select the open, and then select either the machine or the USB stick and select the design that you wish to open. As you are saving things to the machine's memory and to the USB stick, there is another option that you will want to consider to maintain the memory of the machine and USB stick, and that is the trash can. When you select the trash can puts a delete or an X on top of every design either on the machine or the USB stick. When you want to delete a file, all you do is tap on the file with the X. It will ask you, are you sure? And you will check to confirm if you are. If you want to manage the memory on the machine, again, you look for the file with the, select the option with the red X and check to confirm. If you've decided, oh, I selected the wrong one, then you just select the X and it is not deleted. To exit out of deleting, you just select something else. So if you're ready to open something now, you select the open, select your design, and now you're ready to begin anew. How do you know when it's time to do some file management? If you take a look at your file selection and your open folder, you have a status bar at the top that tells you how much of the memory is free. So right now in my designs folder, I've used up about 16% of the space. On the USB stick, I've used up very little, so I have almost all of it open and available to use. So that can be your gauge for when you need to manage your machine's memory. Using the Colors tab, you are able to change colors within a design and see them on screen, as well as change the brand of thread displayed with the embroidery design. Let's take a look. Select your design, select your Colors tab. You can use the arrows to scroll through the colors to select the color you want to change. Select the Change Color icon. You can scroll to find the color that you're looking for, or you can use the search function and type in the number of the thread color that you need. When you see the color number, and the bar appear, tap on the color bar, and now you have made that substitution. You can use the Colors tab breadcrumb, and you can double check that you have exactly made that change, and it appears on screen. If you look at the Edit tab, you'll also see the exact same thing. When you go to the Stitch Out tab, you can see that your first color is color 1902, your second color 5833, and your third color. So you know exactly which thread spool to put on the pin so that your design stitches out as you wish. You can also change the brand of thread. You will again start by selecting the Colors tab, select the change icon, and at the top where the brand is displayed, you will see arrows. Listed in alphabetically are the different thread brands that are on the machine. Find the new brand, select the Change Thread Brand Colors, select the palette breadcrumb to see your changes. Keep in mind that not all thread libraries have the exact same number of spools, so sometimes the substitution will be a best guess. You are now ready to stitch this design out, and when you go to your Stitch Out screen tab, you'll be able to see the new thread brand and the new thread colors that you have chosen. You have the ability to alter stitch density and stitch type on your BERNINA. This is something you might consider if you have enlarged your design beyond the recommended limitations. The recommended limitations are 20% up and 20% below. On the screen are 3 letters. They've each been enlarged 200%, and in order for these to stitch out in a different way, I can change their stitch attributes or their stitch properties. In the information menu toward the bottom is your stitch properties icon. Selecting the B on the far left, I'm going to change the stitch density to open up the stitching. So by looking at the icon, you can tell what's going on. By turning to the left, and I can use the plus or the minus, I'm actually increasing the spacing between the threads. This would be a perfect solution if I were working with a very thick thread instead of the standard 40 weight embroidery thread. So I'm taking this down to about 40%, and then I'll select the check mark, and it has increased the spacing between the stitches. We're going to leave the middle B alone and only change the other B. Again, we'll select the stitch properties again, but this time we're going to increase the density to about 160%. You'll use the lower multifunction knob or the plus or the minus, and what this is doing is it is decreasing the amount of space between the threads. So if I have taken a design and enlarged it and the machine does not add stitches, which it hasn't, then this gives me my best opportunity to have the threads laying next to each other in a very pretty fashion. This is also something you might consider doing anytime you're embroidering satin stitch lettering on a towel, is to cause this to be a little bit closer together, cause the threads to be a little closer together so that the loops don't peek through. You don't need to go to 200%, but you might try 110% and just make those threads a little bit tighter. You would check to confirm, and now that third B has now been changed. There is something else that you can also change in the stitch properties, and that is the stitch type. Satin stitching can be changed to step stitching, and you're able to control what the stitch length would be. So if there was an enlarged design of satin stitching, those are very long threads which could get caught on things. So I would change that to a step stitch, and then I would determine or set the length of the stitch so that it was appropriate for my project. When you have those things complete, you select check, and then you would be ready to stitch out. You may want to stitch this out just as an exercise so that you can see the difference in what the machine does based on your stitch property settings. We're going to take a look at the color wheel and the options that it offers you. We're going to select a design from the USB stick, the dress. We're going to change to the oval hoop and select the information icon to duplicate the dress. Move them into the hoop so that you have your 2 dresses. We'll close the information icon, and now we'll select the Colors tab. If we select the color wheel, The color wheel will show you what's in the hoop, and it shows you that you've got 2 items. You can select one or the other or both, so you can color wheel each of these items independently by selecting one dress alone. To affect the color wheel, you'll move the ball on the slider on the wheel, just like a color wheel, and watch the dresses turn colors. The lower knob, or the lower slider, changes the saturation of the color. Use the other arrow to select the other dress, and then continue changing the color until you find something that you like. And in this way, you're able to change the 2 dresses completely different from each other. So this is using the color wheel, and keep in mind that you may have designs on the machine that you don't like because of the color, but you can use the color wheel to change that color to whatever you need. Well, this looks great because this looks great on screen, but how do you translate this to thread? If you select the palette breadcrumb, you'll notice the colors have already been changed. So those colors were already swapped out. Those are your new colors for the dresses, and when you go to stitch this out, those are the colors that you will be using and putting on your design for your dress. Let's learn how to use ungroup and regroup and rearrange. So we'll start by selecting a design, and we'll select this little design, and we're also going to go into our settings and embroidery, and you want to check that your jump stitch cut is at 1. You'll notice it has a yellow bounded box around it, which means it's been changed. The default is 6, so it's been changed to 1, and that's going to give us the best division of motifs when we split a design. So now I have my design. We'll select the information icon and we'll select ungroup. And then we'll select ungroup. And then you can see how it has split things by color. So elements that you know you don't want, you can just start deleting them. So you can slide them off to the right and they just begin deleting. The pieces that I really want are these 2 pink elements. So I'm going to delete everything else but the pink elements, and then we'll see where we are from there. So now I just have these little pink elements, and I'm going to ungroup these one more time. So we're going to select the ungroup and regroup and ungroup, and I don't need that little circle that's way out in the end, and I'll select check. But now I have these 2 pink pieces, and I am happy that those are separate, and we're going to leave those there because now I can independently pick these up and I can move them around, and they can become part of another design. So let's add something that might be fun to do this with. So we'll select our motifs, and we're going to add this big, large, beautiful alphabet. We're going to go with the A letter. So I can move the A letter around, and I can move my little pink flowers around so that it sort of, sits somewhere and looks nice on the design. If I want the letter to stitch first, I need to rearrange or to move things. So I'm going to want to move this down to the bottom. So with the A selected, we're going to select rearrange, and we're just going to start moving it down, and you can watch it move down to the bottommost layer or the layer that's going to stitch out first. And I could also decide that these 2, I could change the order in which they're going to stitch out. For this design, it doesn't truly matter because they're both going to have the same color. But I could actually now go back and group these 2, or I could keep them separate. So we'll go back to the information icon. Anytime you want to group something, it's always select the layer and the layer above it. So you'll select the ungroup and regroup, and with one layer selected and the plus, now our 2 pink pieces are put back together. So now the pink layers are one layer together, and they would stitch out together, and they are the same color, so that kind of makes sense. To stitch this out, you close everything out of the information menu and go to your needle tab, and now you could stitch this out. But by being able to separate designs, you can see how I can make this alphabet coordinated by placing these little pink flowers within the alphabet in the place that it makes sense for each different letter. So I hope you'll give regroup and grouping a try along with rearrange. Pinpoint placement can also be used to place something and resize. Let's start by selecting pinpoint placement and attaching the hoop when asked. Select the pinpoint placement with a grid, and when you have something this small, use the zoom up function. This allows you to select only one dot when selecting your pinpoint placement dots. Select your first dot. This will center, so we're going to use the multifunction knobs to center and place the top of this P at the topmost point of our marked area on our fabric. You may need to move it sideways or up and down. In resizing, it's not unusual to use both knobs. Set when you have the needle positioned in the right place. And it turns yellow. Let's look at the fabric. So when the fabric in your project are hooped, when you first select your first dot on pinpoint placement, the needle moves to where that is in the hoop. You'll use your multifunction knobs to position the needle over top of your first mark. And on this line we have two dots. We're going to place the top of the P on the top dot and the lower part of the P on the lower dot and resize the P to fit within this space. We've selected set, or we will select set after we've made sure that the needle is going to stitch in the right place. We'll select the second dot, and again we'll use the multifunction knobs to reposition the bottom part of the P on the dot. If our crosshair is crooked in the fabric, we'll end up using both knobs, one to stretch the design and one to position it. It is a proportional resizing, but you are able to set the needle over the specified point, close pinpoint placement, and then begin to sew. So looking at the fabric, we're positioning the bottom of the P on top of that bottom dot and using our hand wheel to rotate the needle down into the area to be sure that we're precisely in the right spot. Use your multifunction knobs to position the needle on top of the dot, and when you have it set, you are ready to begin stitching. You'll stitch your P, and pinpoint placement is a perfect way to be able to resize and align your design between two dots or using two dots and no extra tools for perfect placement. We're going to use this fabric in our second exercise, but let's take a look at how the design's stitched. And it's been resized and centered. Working with free-point pinpoint placement allows you to select any points versus using the grid. We're going to start with some lettering that has a variable baseline, and we're going to change the size just to make it easier and for a quicker stitch out. Then we're going to center our lettering on our crosshair that we've drawn on our project in the hoop. Attach the hoop when prompted. Select the centering the motif icon, and then the needle moves to that position, and now you'll use the multifunction knobs to position the needle over the center of the crosshair and centering the design in the area that you want it placed. Let's take a look at that on the fabric. So we are going to adjust for center. So we're using the centering the motif, and we're going to drop our needle just to be sure we get it precisely centered. You'll always roll the needle right back up to continue moving, and you'll use your multifunction knobs to move. Once you have it centered, you just move on to pinpoint placement. We're going to select the zoom tool so that we can accurately place our point. You can use the hand to slide the screen around and then select your free point positioning and place your first point. Use your multifunction knobs to move the design up or down. Because you've already centered it, you should not be moving it side to side. That will take it off center. Use the set button to set the point. On fabric, the needles move to the spot, and now you're going to use the multifunction knobs to position the needle on top of the line. This is a great tool in case your line is crooked, because it's not hooped right or you laid it in the hoop. It's also great freedom and flexibility in the fact that you don't have to get it exactly right. Then we'll move the screen so that we can set our second point, again at the end or at the bottom of the baseline. You'll use your multifunction knobs to go up or down, and when you have it positioned, you will select the Set key or the Set button. The icon will turn yellow on the screen and you're finished with pinpoint placement. You can close the menu, and let's take a look at this on fabric. When you select your second point, the needle moves across to that spot. Again, you're going to double check that the needle's on the line. Move the multifunction knobs to adjust the needle, and then select your stitch out screen to initiate embroidery and stitch until the design completes. When the design completes, you'll notice that the alignment was set to the most common baseline of the lowercase letters, and this gives us perfect placement by setting any 2 points we select. Endless embroidery is a great way to create borders for quilts or pillowcases or draperies or borders for any project. We'll begin by selecting our design. We're working with our oval hoop, and this will give us a good place to start, but of course if you were doing a very lengthy project, the longest hoop possible would be best. We're going to rotate this design about 15 degrees. This is not a magic number, it's just one that while we played we discovered worked good with this particular design. And this is something you'll do too. We'll select the endless embroidery icon, and it comfortably fills the hoop with the motifs to stitch out as well as the registration marks, which are the little arrows that you see on the screen. You have room for the design to stitch out and to comfortably re-hoop so that you can go from hoop to hoop to hoop. A couple of other things that you can do with endless embroidery is to change the number of motifs in the hoop. So if you would like to have 4, you can select 4. You'll notice the red bounded area around the hoop indicates you're outside the hoop, but if you still really want 4, you can use the Fit to Hoop option to shrink the designs to fit to the hoop. The other icon allows you to affect the spacing between the motifs. Any of these that you set can be reset by touching the yellow bounded box. When you have your design, check to confirm. You'll notice the design comes to the edit screen grouped, so everything is in layer 1. If you want to make further adjustments to this, select layer 1, scroll up and select the Group Ungroup, and select Ungroup. Select layers 2 and 4 to mirror image. So stay within the Eye menu, select layer 2 and select mirror image, and select layer 4 in mirror image. This is a more precise way of selecting your motifs and not allowing the design to move or shift by touching the screen. You can close, and now you're ready to stitch this out. You know that this design is the same design repeated over and over. In endless embroidery, the same design will be duplicated around the screen many times, so the same colors over and over, giving you 14 color changes in this design. Activate the Resequence tool to minimize those down to 4. So all of your green colors will stitch at one time, the next color will stitch all at one time, and so forth. And you can scroll through to see each of those colors. Do not forget to stitch out the endless markers. This is your lineup points when you go from hoop to hoop to hoop, and this is what the needle will line up with to maintain the spacing that was designed or developed inside the hoop. When the design finishes, you'll be presented with 2 options, single embroidery or endless embroidery, and you'll want to select the endless embroidery option. You can scroll those last icons on the screen to find the endless embroidery icon, and this is the screen that you will get. This is the screen or the animation that is indicating it's time to rehoop, and you should rehoop something like this. The reference marks need to be inside the hoop because these are your match points. You probably will also have part of the design in the hoop. When you've rehooped, go ahead and select the check, then the needle moves to that position, should line up with the arrow. If it does not, you will use your multifunction knobs to position the needle over top the tip of the stitched arrow. You'll select the other arrow and the needle moves to that position. When I'm working with endless embroidery, I've drawn a line all the way down my fabric, and when I hoop so that the templates are centered. You also can use pinpoint placement when working with endless embroidery. When you have your needle marks set with the arrows that are stitched, you are ready to stitch your design. You will select the check mark and you will stitch another sequence of elements, and you will continue doing this until your endless embroidery is complete. Let's take a look at working with importing stitches. On some machines there's a folder full of all of the sewing stitches in the embroidery side. The icons that mark the folders are the same icons that indicate the stitch categories on the sewing side. We'll select the decorative stitches and we're going to look for folder 1201, and we're going to scroll until we find a design that we like. We want to work with an area a little bit larger than this, so we're going to select the oval hoop and we'll close. We'll work with the information icon and we'll select endless embroidery. When we come into our endless embroidery screen, we're going to decrease the number of motifs to 12, and if your reference marks were turned on, then let's turn them off because we're going to do something different with this design. In cases where you're not going from hoop to hoop to hoop, you don't need any reference marks to stitch out, so we're going to eliminate those. And then check to confirm. We also can duplicate this and mirror image it to create something that even looks better than what we started with. With everything selected, we're going to rotate this 90 degrees. We're also going to select the jumbo hoop and close. You could also select the maxi hoop. We're going to select endless embroidery again, and then we're going to select as many of these as we feel looks like it makes a square. 6 or 7 of these, and check to confirm. What we have created is a stitched background. This is great for creating texture into projects, or adding a letter, a monogram, or adding another design. So we'll select Add, we'll go to our designs, we'll look in our designs folder, and we'll select the Swiss Mountain. Scrolling down to the bottom, you see now I've got a great background for a nice design. That's one way to use imported stitches, but there's other ways. So we're just going to delete the pattern that we created, and even with our mountain still on the screen, we could add individual stitches as scattered stitches. So you may have some snowflake type looking designs or stitches that you want to add into the mix, and all you do is add the stitch. You can continue to do duplicate, and now you can add little snowflakes and scatter stitches individually around an embroidery design. So this is another way to work with imported stitches, and we'll scroll down to see the bottom. So again, very fun opportunities to work with imported stitches. Another way, a lot of people like to make clothes or need buttonholes and they don't want to sew them out individually. So you can also bring in your buttonholes. So we'll select the Stitches folder and the Buttonhole menu. We'll select our buttonholes. We're going to go ahead and turn this 90 degrees. Depending on how you have it oriented on how your item is oriented will depend on how you rotate your buttonhole. We'll go into the hoop size that we need, and let's just say for the sake of time we're going to select the oval hoop. We'll select the endless embroidery, and then we will change the number of buttonholes we need, and then we'll increase the spacing in between each of the buttonholes. You can also, notice I'm using the knobs, the lower knob, and this will increase the spacing. This will also allow you to decide really how many buttonholes that you need. But a buttonhole is a perfect thing to embroider. You could lay your pillow back, or your jacket, or your blouse, or your placket down onto some stabilizer. Let the machine stitch the buttonholes for you. Let it do it as an embroidery. Check to confirm, and now you're ready to stitch your buttonholes. Let's take a look at the shaping tool found only on the BERNINA 880 Plus. This is a great way to arrange stitches or embroidery designs and letters into 9 or more shapes to form frames and/or decorative arrangements. It will work with any embroidery design, but folder number 5 is full of small designs that may be perfectly suited for working with shaping. We'll start with design number 5, and we're going to pick a hoop size that's a little bit larger to give us some room to work. Select the information icon and shaping. The size of the shape you get is dependent upon the hoop that you have selected, so a jumbo hoop will produce a much larger circle. Keep that in mind when you're selecting your hoop size. There are different shapes to select from. Remember that anytime that you see a partial icon, that means that there's more. So when you scroll up, you see that there are additional shapes to select from. You can select the star, and since this is a kind of a 5-sided element, let's start by putting 5 motifs on our star. This next series of icons affects the size of the shape. By using the plus or the minus, I can make the star larger or smaller. When the lock is engaged, it means that the X or the width and the length or the height are going to operate or be proportionally rescaled. If I turn off the lock, then I have an opportunity to get a distorted image. Using the plus 90 changes the orientation of each motif 90 degrees, and it's here that I can begin to see a shape forming. So you can audition the plus 90 over and over until you find something that you like. The mirror image will mirror image every other design in the shape. With there being an odd number of elements, the mirror image is probably not the best choice for this particular design. When you find something you like, check to confirm. If you decide that you don't want to stitch this out and would like to try another shape, use the undo feature to get back to a single element. Select your shaping tool and select another object, such as the circle. We'll put some elements on our circle, change the size, and again we'll play around with plus 90 to see what kind of good looking things we can get with a wreath. Putting an 8th element in place and then mirror imaging every other element gives us something completely different. You can see how this could form a nice frame for a letter, maybe something on a towel or a napkin, but that's one way that you can use this. As you're working with shapes, even though the shape is inside the hoop, the elements may not be. If this is the size that you like, select check to confirm, and then when you're ready to embroider this out, select a different hoop size. And now you're able to embroider this, add other designs, or do whatever you would like. You also can work with individual stitches when you are working with the Shape Designer. So select the Stitches folder and select some elements that you think might look nice. Select the information icon and the shaping function, and we're just going to begin putting little stitches onto our square, and I'm going to select 16 since that's divisible by 4. Then I'm going to start changing these with plus 90, and you can see how very quickly some very interesting things appear. You can check to confirm and stitch this out. You also could take a shape design back into shaping. Select a larger hoop. So there are a lot of very fun things that you can do with shaping. It's really all about just having a little time to sit and play with it on your machine. Have fun.
Purchase your new machine today by visiting SewingMachinesPlus.com or stop by one of our retail locations.